everybody, welcome back to Virtual MOSI. I'm Riley, and today we're going to be talking about digestion. But first, our question from last video. What is the maximum number of hot dogs a person can eat? Well, this July, a person named Joey Chestnut broke the new record with 75, which is insane. But scientists who have devoted their lives to answering such a critical question have come up with the number of 83 as the maximum potential that one could eat. So, with that being said, I'll go over today's objectives. The 3 objectives for today are to learn the 3 types of macromolecules. If you know what they are, leave them in the questions right now. Second, learn the path that food takes through our digestive tract. And third, we want to learn how to identify foods that we eat based on the macromolecules that they're made up of. So, I have a couple meals with me today. We're going to get back to that in just a few. But first, I want to go over what the 3 macromolecules are. The first is maybe the most common in our diets, carbohydrates. So, carbohydrates are made up of sugar molecules that offer easy digestion and quick energy, so we can use them up really quickly. Second, we have fats. These foods are made up of fatty acids and glycerols that are harder for our bodies to digest but offer longer lasting energy. Third, we have proteins, which are foods made up of amino acids that are essential for building muscle after we exercise. So all 3 of these types of macromolecules play a very important role in our digestion, and they offer us energy whenever we do anything. So let's take a look at our digestive tract. Digestion starts before we even have any food in front of us sometimes. If we're just thinking about a food that we really like, we might start to salivate. So if I say, imagine a delicious piece of chocolate cake right in front of you, even though it's a little bit early in the morning, might be a little too early for me to have some cake, just think about it. Right here we have our mouth where we initially start the digestive process. We'll put some food in our mouth, we'll chew it up with our teeth, we'll swish it around with our tongue until that food forms a bolus. From there, we will push that with our tongue down our esophagus, and our esophagus uses this neat little process called peristalsis, where the muscles move the food down the tube into the stomach. In the stomach, the food will be churned up with the strong muscles all throughout, and our stomachs also have acid in them, so it begins the digestive process there. From here, it'll move down this tube into our small intestine, which is this entire region here. It's not called the small intestine because it's short, it's just far narrower than the large intestine you see next. But before we get to the small intestine here, I want to go over some of the accessory organs. That's the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas here. So they're called the accessory organs because food doesn't technically travel through them, but they still play a major role in our digestive systems. So the pancreas here will secrete enzymes that allow for the digestion of carbs, fats, and proteins. Very important. The liver here produces an enzyme that allows us to digest fats, and it's held in the gallbladder until it's released through this tube and into the small intestine. Now, the small intestine, which again is this entire organ here, pretty large, will allow our food to actually be absorbed. This is where we absorb all of the nutrients from our carbs, fats, and proteins. And once it goes all the way through all of these little tubes here, it'll pass on to the large intestine. In the large intestine, it'll go up and around and all the way down here, and throughout the whole process, the water from your food will be absorbed until you are just left with stool, where it will be excreted through the rectum. So that's generally a quick overview of our digestive tract. We'll put him away. And we'll head back to our macromolecules. Now, our macromolecules are very critical when we're considering what we want to be putting into our bodies. any food that we eat is going to act as fuel for any activities that we do throughout the day. So we want to be considerate of what kind of energy our food is going to be giving us, especially if we're considering, like, we want to go to the park today, we want to go play a game of football, or maybe if you aren't going to be as active during the day, you might want less energy, so you might consume less food and less less energy dense foods. So let's move on to a pretty typical lunch for like a summer cookout. If you guys are planning on having any of those this summer, you will definitely see some of these foods here. So I have here a cheeseburger, some chips, and a cookie. Maybe not the healthiest meal, but these are all foods that I know you guys are going to encounter. So right here, I have some little helpful tools to help us break down what we're looking at. So to start off with, let's open up our burger and see what we have inside. So right here, we can already see our bun. Obviously, we have our burger, we have some lettuce, we have some cheese. And we want to break this meal down into the carbs, proteins, and fats. So pretty much every food that you encounter will have a little bit of all of these things, but some of them, it's important to identify the biggest component within each, so we can ensure that we're getting a nice mix of carbs, fats, and proteins in our meals. So let's take a look at what we have. The bun here is obviously made out of bread. And when we're identifying the macromolecules that we're eating, we want to ask ourselves a couple of questions. First is it sweet or is it savory? And this is a good way to indicate whether something is a carb on one side or a fat and a protein on the other. So this is not a hard and fast rule, but if something is really sweet, you can be pretty sure that it's mostly carbs, since carbs are made up of sugars. So maybe you want to ask yourself, is the bread sweet or is it savory? So while bread isn't terribly sweet, it's certainly more on the sweet side than it is savory. Another question you might want to ask yourself is, are the foods that you're eating light or are they heavy? So bread is certainly lighter than, for example, the burger we have underneath it. The burger, I don't know if you've given this any thought, but maybe the next time you're eating a burger, you want to consider whether the bread is digesting very quickly in your body and whether the meat that you're eating is digesting very slowly in your body. Consider if you can tell the difference. So here we have our bread. I think most people will know here that bread is a carb. It's classic. Whenever you're considering a carb, bread comes to mind, for me at least. Second, we have our ketchup, which is made out of tomatoes. So most fruits and vegetables that you will encounter are going to be carbs, mostly. While they do have some proteins laden within them, they're mostly carbs. So our ketchup, also going to be a carb. Now, interestingly enough, our mustard is going to be comprised mostly of fat. There's a pretty good mix of carbs, proteins, and fats within our mustard, but even being the very low-calorie condiment that it is, mostly fats. Next up, we have our lettuce, and as I just said, our fruits and vegetables are almost always going to be carbs. Now we get down to our cheese and our actual burger. So cheese and most dairy products are most often going to be largely composed of fats, and that means that they are high energy and they take a long time to digest. That's why a lot of people have a more difficult time digesting dairy products like that. So our cheese is going to be fat, and our dense, nutrient-packed meat down here is going to be protein. Next up, our little side dishes are going to be a little bit easier to identify, but let's see if you can give it a shot right now. So for our chips here, they're very light If you were to continue chewing them for a long period of time, they might even get sweet, even though they have a salty coating. What do you think they are? Carbs, absolutely. So let's see if we can stick this in the pile without it falling over. Kinda. Our chips are going to be carbs. Very good. And next up, we have our cookie here. So if we want to break down our cookie a little bit farther than just calling it a cookie, it's a chocolate chip cookie. So we have pretty much our dough and we have our chocolate chips. Our dough is going to be largely comprised of sugar and flour. So right there, we can give it just a carb. But our chocolate chips are made up of dairy. So that is going to have some fat in it. I don't know where my other flag went, but we'll use this one right now. Stick that one in a chocolate chip. It has some fats. So if you can look at our plate here, you will see that there is some mix of our fats, our carbs, and our proteins, but maybe you'll also see that we're lacking a little bit in the proteins, maybe in the fats. So we want maybe a little bit of a better mix than we have right here. So that's just something to consider when you are planning out a meal or eating one. And next, we will go on to my lunch. So I want to know if you can help me break down what I'm eating for lunch today. I just have a standard peanut butter and fluff sandwich. If you don't know what fluff is, it's awesome. I highly recommend you find out about it. We've got peanut butter on this side. We've got our mixed up marshmallows on this one. And of course, we have our classic bread. So I want you to tell me what makes up the peanut butter. What macromolecule is that? What is in the fluff that I have there, which again is made up of marshmallows? And what do we have in the bread there? Is this a balanced meal? Please let me know in the comments. So that's about going to wrap up what we have for today. Remember, we have the 3 macromolecules, carbs, proteins, and fats, and they all go through our same digestive tract, even though they get processed a little bit differently. Hope you enjoyed the lesson for today. My question for the next episode, when you tune in next, is where do bees get their energy from? Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.